What's up, guys? I'm here with MikeG, Mr. Do It Moving.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Appreciate you taking the time in DC to have me interview you.
My pleasure.
MikeG is a performance coach who works primarily with Jrue Holiday. He's with Spencer Dinwiddie right now. You've worked with a lot of NBA players, and the main thing to distinguish Mike is he's a performance coach, which means he's holistically treating these players, whether it comes from sleep, diet, that nutrition recovery component. So he's not just the strength and conditioning component. Some things people don't know about Mike is he played D2 football.
Yes, sir.
At Fair State in Michigan.
Wow. Did your research?
If you look up this photo, you have to Google this photo right now of Mike. He's got the slickest hair and a very nice mustache.
Very nice, yeah.
So from there, you got your start from NFL Combine training.
Yeah.
And then you met Jrue at the factory, right? Basically.
Sure did.
And started working with him. They handpicked you, wanted you to train him.
Yeah.
And then you've been with him for, this is your 11th year.
Correct.
Right. So
Correct. Yeah.
Mike has done a ton of interviews, a ton of podcasts. So if you want to go check those out, I would highly go check out all the ones he's been on, whether it's BJF Performance, with Cole, with Tyler.
Shout out to Cole.
So those are all great things, and I'm going to try to not cover too many of those things that you've done. I guess the questions that I wanted to ask you is, I've been with Jeremy for over a decade. You've been with Jrue over a decade. In that over a decade period, what were some things that Jrue took multiple seasons to work on to improve? Whether that's like from a physical quality side, or whether that's from like a skill development side. So over 11 off seasons.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and we kind of discussed this over the phone yesterday. It's really important to understand that over the lifespan of an athletic career, we're always continuously trying to reach benchmarks and goals, and understand that the way Jrue approaches his training, his nutrition, his sleep was built within that decade of work. You know what I mean? I think that people often make the mistake that we can change ourselves in just one off season, which isn't necessarily untrue. However, I think that we need to look at training from the scope of a global career view versus just one off season.
Sure.
And unfortunately, for a lot of these young guys, they don't really look at training as an important, vital key or component to their career until something bad happens.
And then it's the sleep, then it's the nutrition.
Yeah, so, why am I always getting hurt? Why am I always feeling bad? Why, these types of ideas and concepts start to arise, and then finally they come to realization and enlightenment that maybe this off-season, off-court work is important.
For sure.
And I think that with the King, LeBron, publicly admitting that he spends over $1.5 million on his body alone, whether it's medical, nutrition, training, etc., helps us, guys like you and I, deliver this message that it's important. It's very important. It allows you to do what you do at a high level for a long period of time. So to circle back to the question, some of the things that Jrue initially didn't quite understand or grasp was the idea that sleep and nutrition was a big part of health and performing at a high level. If you guys can recall, the first 2, 3, 4 seasons when he was with Philly, he had some injuries that he occurred and sustained, and one was a big one where he had a titanium rod inserted down the shaft of his tibia because he kept having stress fractures. And these stress fractures over time can graduate to a compound tibia fracture, which we've seen Livingston have, and we've seen Paul George have. And usually it's just like the bone's fraying and it's weak and we don't see it or feel it, but all of a sudden that one impact boom, that thing snaps. And Jrue had the same thing potentially going into that very dangerous area. So he got sat down. He was always in pain. And at this time, I wasn't full-time. It was just summertime training. But that's when the realization occurred. Again, that negative thing happened. Maybe I need to look at my sleep. Maybe I need to look at my nutrition and also my habits and behaviors. And also how am I training throughout the season as well. It's not just about the off season. So I think a key component to understanding that if you're working with players over the course of a career, that we are definitely trying to reinvent ourselves to not only create the quality adaptations that we're looking for, but mainly keeping the player interested, focused, and also keeping the training novel to the point to where it's something fresh and new every offseason.
Yeah.
But then also establishing these baseline principles of like, this is what needs to be done. This is how your body responds to certain forces and movement. These are the inhibitions in your joints that we always need to address. And I have a phrase that I'm trying to coin, and it's called everyday drills, EDDs. And EDDs are basic prescriptive exercise for each individual. So, we can group up in platoon basketball players and say that, they probably have tight quads and they probably have poor big toe extension. But what about Jrue's right elbow, or what about Jrue's left ankle, or what, something very specific to him. And now I'm feeding and hitting those targets every single day. So I think mainly creating the understanding and education and awareness within players takes time. And that's mainly the focus behind long-term athletic development within a career.
Which is super challenging because some trainers like you and I would only get a guy or a guy might only come in and want to work out for 3 weeks.
Absolutely.
Or 12 weeks. And that puts a lot of pressure as a trainer. Obviously, we care about long-term athletic development. But
Sure.
If you got a guy and you don't know if he's going to work with you past a week, I feel like in this industry, a lot of trainers are pressured into maybe doing something for the player that might not make sense. So I think this is an important conversation to know, like, that even with Jrue, like, it took years. With Jeremy, it took years to change his shot and years to correct some of his movements. And it wasn't, if we went to somebody who felt that pressure, then he wouldn't have got kind of the care that he needed to get, basically. Is there like a one quality that you can remember that that you guys really hammered, whether it was like a lateral push or decel or some type of physical quality on the court that he maybe was okay at but wanted to get even better at?
Yeah, absolutely. To add to the long-term athletic development pieces, we get better as coaches as well. Again, from year 1 to year 11, I'm gaining more knowledge. I'm gaining more experience. I'm trying to get better every year so that I can be better for the player, right? So my eye is getting better. My eye for movement and biomechanics is getting better. And I think that also plays well into, we're both long-term athletic development, you know what I mean? So whether as a practitioner or a performer, one of the main physical qualities that we focused on was that tissue tolerance within the lower leg. Through the feet, through the Achilles, up into the calves, so that it could kind of take pressure off of the tibias, because he had stress fractures in both.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, and they actually wanted to reinforce both tibias with titanium rods, in which he declined one and
Not
said,
trying to be Wolverine.
Exactly. So that was a very, very important component of our training moving forward, just understanding extensive plyos,
Gotcha.
Creating that tissue tolerance, and then also backing up all of our outputs with the correct nutrition so that you can reinforce all that tissue and collagen network to sustain and become stronger. Understanding load, right? Because as a young strength coach and as a young performance coach, we're trying to also establish ourselves as leaders in the field, if you will. Give people what we know. And sometimes we too have to reflect and do a self-talk and say what went well about this session, what went well about this week, what went well about this month, so that we can continue to be accountable and hold ourselves accountable and be like, that wasn't good. Maybe we need to change this. And the feedback from the player is always something that we're looking for, so that we can continue to make changes where necessary.
Right.
So I think load management, and that's such a
means so many things to different
right
people.
like that's such a broad term, but like load management from the standpoint of like understanding impacts, understanding how to create recovery when you need it, understanding when to pull back even though you have this high load session scheduled. Like, just because your program says you need to do this because this is what it looks like on paper doesn't mean that when the player walks in, he's quiet, has a long face, one word answers, doesn't mean you got to still push the go button.
And that's what coaching is right there. Is it's not always following the block or the program.
Yeah.
It's the subjective and the observations you're seeing. The cadence he's walking in, seeing the news, knowing he's checking his phone more than ever, he's distracted. There's not that same intention even in the warm-up. Right then and there, you almost have to be like, okay, today was a max effort day. Today was supposed to be whatever. We're gonna pivot, and you kind of have to find ways to maybe build in intensity. But then in my head too, I'm also thinking about, okay, if I have these set of drills scheduled in my head, so, this drill is an RPE 9. This drill is very hard. This drill is intensive, and immediately I'm moving those puzzles around, saying like, okay, we're gonna take away this one that I have planned, but he doesn't know, what I have. So I'm still able to, give him some load and some intensity, but maybe I don't want to say game it, but modify it on the fly without making it seem like.
Absolutely, you definitely have. It's an art for sure to A, recognize the writings on the wall, B, remove our own ego from the picture. Like, no, they need to do my program. How many coaches do that? And that's a very, very huge mistake. Like, it's not about us, it's about them. And then C, how do we manipulate the acute variables and the exercise and the movements to take away impact? And are we closed chain, open chain? Like, we can still make the player feel like they're working, but still it's an active recovery day. And I think that it takes a lot of understanding of just knowledge of exercise and exercise physiology and all the sciences to apply that approach. But again, over the course of 11 years, I'm getting better at identifying. Exactly. And year one, I definitely was not like that. It was like, today's the day, this is what we got. And now year 11, I'm like, first step that the guy walks in the door, I know exactly what type of session we're having. So.
And you also know what he struggles with and he doesn't struggle with, so you're able to, what is most taxing on him, right? So you can maybe do like more aerobic type training for him, that workout or some type of movement thing where he's breaking his sweat and moving, but he's not meeting those like high demands of decel or some type of lots of contact where he might be exposed to a lot of impact. I'm MikeG. 11 years ago, sitting in this chair. What is one thing you would tell yourself in terms of as a trainer, and then what would be the other thing you would tell yourself from a personal development standpoint? So one is like knowledge, and one would be like just your own personal growth.
Number one, and I think all of us bullheaded young strength coaches and performance coaches go through this. Just be humble and be open-minded, because initially the mentors and the trainers or performance coaches that were around me, that were my higher ups and my mentors, I disagreed with them a lot. And my personality is a stand up, speak when I feel a certain way type personality. And back then, I didn't know how to word my words correctly. I didn't know how to create. I didn't know how to create a quality tone. I didn't have social intelligence. I didn't have social empathy. I didn't have these qualities that we need to have as human beings. To be honest, like we all need these qualities to be effective human beings in this crazy world. So I ruffled a lot of feathers early, and here I am, this young know-it-all that don't know nothing kid, essentially, going against the grain oftentimes, and I think that put me in positions to not win or succeed a lot early in my career. And looking back on it, you know, his name is Scott Mitchell. Shout out to Scott Mitchell.
If you're watching.
He probably won't, but I still need to say it. He's the one that kind of took me under his wing and showed me the philosophy that I currently use today. But he and I bumped heads a lot. And I think it was a personality difference. He was more reserved and quiet. I'm more loud and obnoxious. Less obnoxious now. But, you know, we just rubbed each other the wrong way from that standpoint. And then the fact that I thought I knew everything probably didn't come off too well to him.
Sure.
So it probably didn't it probably lent itself to him not wanting to teach me as much. See what I'm saying? So like I robbed myself from learning, and that's a huge mistake. So that's definitely something I would tell myself 11 years ago. We kind of look at like each other, so it's easy. But yeah, man, just be humble and just know that everyone is trying to help you, and just know that you don't know everything and you'll never know everything, and that's okay. And that's a good position to be in, because now you're in a position to learn. From a personal standpoint, I think that I would probably tell myself to not try to conquer the world in a day. I took on a lot as a young kid, trying to do anything and everything I could to be the best. Now, that's not such a bad thing, but it's a bad thing when it starts to interfere with your personal life, and it starts to interfere with your personal health, and you just don't have enough time to look up and smell the roses. And I think that that's important, to be present in moments that are really important in your life and not be so worried about getting better, because that's all I cared about was getting better. What's the next book I can read? What's the next conference I can attend to? What's the next seminar I can go to? Where can I go shadow? Where can I train? Where can I get better? And a lot of that has to do with just my natural personality and what's ingrained in me. But also, it's important to be present. It's important to be mindful. And I think that that's a definite piece of advice that I tell myself 11 years ago, is just, hey, be present in the moments that you're allowed to be. It's okay to be ambitious and want to be the best, but also learn how to differentiate professional and personal, because there is a balance.
And I think I can see where that comes from, kind of being from a military family, like your dad, and,
Yep.
and I'm assuming your upbringing was very disciplined.
Correct.
Very habits, like your routines, like you got to do this, and so
Yeah.
there was that, factor instilled of you of wanting to always, do things well and keep improving and always trying to be your best version of yourself. And then playing football, I'm assuming, you've talked about it before, how you didn't pass the eye test, right? Or the initial eye test, right?
Correct.
And you had to be super strong. You had to squat over 400 pounds, clean over 300, bench, putting up Mike's numbers right now, to be, to leave no reason for them to.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's hard, because that's what gave you success. That type of mentality. And so when you did get to that next level, why would you abandon that philosophy? But like so many things in life, we have to continue to evolve.
Absolutely.
As the circumstances evolve, and staying ourselves obviously sometimes can rob us of like the better version of who we can be. So I think MikeG from 10 years ago, I hope you're watching this somehow.
Well, I think a key word that you said was evolve, evolution. And you know, we all know the 60, 70-year-old person that is stuck in their ways. And I tell young people, not old people because they're my elders, but I tell young people, don't be stuck in your ways and be so closed-minded because you'll miss out on the world.
Yeah.
And that for me is the main principle of what I'm saying is if you stay stuck in your ways and you don't evolve, you'll miss out on the world. And the world is a beautiful place. It can be harsh, but it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, and so, you know, some things I was thinking about too is what do people not really understand about our work from the outside?
Personally, because not everyone's the same in terms of like who we are as coaches, but I know for sure you are the same as I am. It's not a 2-hour job. And what I mean by 2-hour a day job, but what I mean by that is, yes, we'll spend 1.5 hours to 2 hours in the gym, but the work wasn't just that. There's a lot of work and preparation done prior to that session, and there is a lot of work and preparation after the session for the next day. And, you know, I'm studying movement. I'm looking at game film. I'm talking to position coaches. I'm doing as much research. I'm reading books outside of the fields that I'm an expert in. See what I'm saying? So, and again, I'm pretty sure you parallel these sentiments, is that there is a lot of work that people don't recognize or see that helps us do what we can at the level that we do it at. And not everyone's like that. Not everyone's built like us. Like, we really believe in our craft, and we really believe that we want the best for our people. Anybody that decides to execute and engage me as a trainer or coach, they get 110% of us. And I think a lot of people don't really understand. You know, they see the glamorous side of it. They see that we're traveling a lot and going the gear. They see that we're flying everywhere, and you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm very blessed to be in that position. But there is a lot of work that's done that no one knows about or hears about or talks about. And I'm not saying this because I want people to know about it, right, because I love what we do. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing it. But I think that that's something that is very undervalued or not understood. How about the fact that we're in the gym experimenting with ourselves, right? Like, we need to be able to maintain proficiency of movement for demonstration purposes. You know what I mean? So when you love the art and craft of coaching like we do, it's not just a 2-hour endeavor. There's a lot of work that's done behind this so that we can do it at this level.
Yeah, and one thing to expound on that is the mind literally never stops thinking about it. You're going to eat. You're with your spouse. Like, and that's one thing that I've tried to grow in that area, is that we don't compartmentalize this stuff.
No.
It just, we go to sleep thinking about it. You're taking a shower, you're thinking about, oh wait, no, I gotta change that for tomorrow. You go to bed thinking about it, and it is life consuming.
Yep.
There is very little boundaries, and you see guys at the highest levels in the NBA as like strength and conditioning or even skill development too. They're kind of, not all of them, but the ones who really love their craft they're the same way. Like,
absolutely,
they're living a NBA life because they're on the road and they're doing all those things, the same things that the NBA players do. And one thing that I think you touched on that I think is really important is that reading from things outside of your field.
Yeah.
Because if we're always pulling from these same mental models that everyone else is talking about or that everyone else in our field is doing, we will only look at a problem with one lens. And we'll only be able to come up with the solutions that everyone else has come up with. But if a guy has had a same injury, or if a guy has some movement pattern that, you know, when I think about Tim Tebow, how many coaches probably work with Tim Tebow to try to change his form and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was so deep in his, you know, the skill development was so deep in it, like it wasn't that easy to like changing. So what I'm saying is like learning from other disciplines and other fields provides us with another framework or another set of tools to solve problems. And I think that doesn't happen enough in our field. It's kind of like, okay, what's everyone reading? Everyone's reading Franz Bosch. Everyone, you need to read Super Training or Bondarchuk or understand all the models, which is good.
Yeah,
you should,
for sure.
And you should see what's on the cutting edge. But that's not... If everything was explained or figured out, we wouldn't have injuries, and we would know the secret sauce every single time for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's just not true.
Yeah. And how about the idea that you could give the same program to 10 coaches and you get 10 results? So what is that? Why is that? Like that's such a true statement. There's so many components that go into executing a program. It's not just the words and the exercises and the acute variables. There's so many things that we already kind of talked about. Subjective measures, you know what I mean?
It's coaching, the ability to coach, and then what you've talked about in the past is coaching and then getting intent from your players. And so intent-wise, what do you think, you training high school and college guys, and then you obviously being with pros, what is that gap that you see in maybe how they train, how they think about the game, or why is it some guys who maybe look great on paper, have good collegiate careers, don't make it successfully at the next level?
It's a very multifactorial answer. I think that the number one reason why people don't pan out, it's talent. And first and foremost, like we as performance coaches do have an impact. However, it's a very nominal impact when you compare it to talent, raw, sheer talent, because at the end of the day, there's 350 NBA players or 450 NBA players in the world. How many college basketball players are there? And not even college basketball players, but players that are eligible to go to the NBA.
Right.
Like that is such a small percentage, and what dictates the difference between that 450 and the world, I think, is talent. I think that we have our niche, we have our influence, but if you look at players throughout their lifespan, they're not training, they're playing, and sometimes players don't really get a true training culture or program until the pros. Because even in college, you get a senior in high school that has terrible movement patterns. Tyler and I talked about this on the podcast we did a couple weeks ago. He did NBA draft evaluations, and this kid was at this school for 4 years and can't squat. Like, what were you doing? No shade thrown at these coaches, these strength coaches in college, but like, what is going on? Like, how come and the answer is because hoopers don't train. Either A, until something bad happens, or B, they have a very special group around them growing up.
Yeah.
That's implied this is important. This is what it takes. Very, very rare group, but it does happen. So for me,
when they make it to an NBA team and they have to do it,
right? But then even then, like my first year with the Pelicans, 90% of them couldn't move with the external load well, and I'm just like, how is this possible? Again, no shade. I'm just saying these are my observations.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be a perfect bilateral overhead squat as the FMS would impose a 3, but can you like front squat like with a goblet load? You know what I mean? Heels elevate. You make the exercise fit your athlete. However, can you still execute the motion, right? So talent is number one for me because, guys can get away with not being trained and still excel at an extremely high level. It's all over the place. Number two, a lot of these injuries are occurring early. There are high school kids, there are 13, 14-year-olds that are blowing their ACLs out. and this is just an anomaly to me, this is insane. I personally believe that it's our environment and behavior choices. Kids are playing way too much. The load is crazy.
4-year seasons.
No off season. Combine that with fast food and hot dogs at the game. I mean, what type of food were you eating back in AAU? Like, what type of food are these kids really eating in between the 4 games that they play in one day? Yeah. The shoes are terrible. You know what I mean? Like, it's more about aesthetics than actual functioning and structure. And you know, you just come and then sleep. So everybody's on their phone, tech neck, like it all adds up in my opinion. I think that this is a huge epidemic that we need to, as performance coaches and professionals in this field, to freaking intervene and educate. But again, you have to be very thoughtful on how you explain these things to these kids, because you know, you got 16-year-olds making millions of dollars on social media. How do I talk to you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, these kids are really making millions of dollars through social media, and they're 17-year-olds not even signed to a college or going to the NBA yet.
And their attention spans have that, and they didn't, when you and I were growing up, like if there was an altercation, you couldn't avoid it. There was no you weren't commenting on this guy's post. There was no Facebook. There was no YouTube.
Nothing.
It was, hey, we have a problem. Say it to my face. And so, but in today's world, if you have a problem with someone, you just cut them out. You just stop. Don't reply to their DMs. Like, block them. Like, you avoid that stuff that makes you grow. And me and Westy were talking about this when he was playing at Gonzaga. Like, they would have these things where they would lock all the guys in the room and they would have to hash out their problems with each other.
Oh wow,
like,
that's amazing.
Like, hey, you're being selfish. Like, hey, when you're doing this.
Little family intervention.
Yeah, and that even in NBA circle is very rare because, again, egos. Like what you're talking about. So, you know, you talked about talent and then sleep.
Just the behavioral, environmental factors that these kids are put in. And that's why the injuries, in my opinion, are just going through the roof. And then if you can dodge all those bullets in spite of your bad habits and in spite of all the poison that's in your environment, both physically and mentally, it's because you're talented that you made it. You know what I mean? Again, there is a small percentage of kids that are training the right way and actually doing things the right way, but it's very rare.
It's usually because they're not talented, though, that they have to train that way to
like me. This is the reason why I'm in this field, is because I wasn't as talented, so I locked in on the areas that I knew I could control. Yeah,
and I mean, it goes back to the point that you have to be a PhD at your sport. Like, you have to be, that trumps everything. And as performance coaches, everything you're doing is to enhance that, but you still have to have that. And I think my answer to this question, and you can tell me what you think about it, is that people are in love. You know, Jordan and Kobe have done, they work, obviously, like extremely hard. Legendary work, right?
Legendary.
And I think everyone grows up in basketball, tries to emulate that type of work ethic. And so you always hear guys be like, oh yeah, what'd you do? Oh, I was at the gym 4 hours. I was at the gym 3 hours.
Sure.
Oh man, I train 7 days a week.
Sure.
Okay, if you're training 3 hours, 7 days a week, how hard can you be going during those sessions? How intentional, locked in can you be doing? Can you be doing? Are you locked in? And I guess what I think is that the guys who make it, who are really talented, people think separation is like, oh, he's so talented. He is, but he's doing it every workout. Every time, Jrue this with you, every time Spencer or one of those guys go onto the court, they are actually improving, even if it's a little bit, because they're so locked in, they're so focused. And we joke about attention spans and whatnot, but if you get a high-level guy, he is laser focused. And when I say laser focused, I mean like there is nothing else he's thinking about and visualizing on the court. And what I think players don't realize is like, dude, this off season I worked out 4 months straight. It's like, cool. Jrue's been doing that for 15 years.
Right.
Jeremy's been doing this for 11 off seasons straight.
Yeah.
Like 3 to 4 months every off season consecutive. Can you say that about yourself? And then they're like, I had one off season, you know?
Right.
So I think that's, people don't realize, like, that's compound interest, man. That's what, one day 2 years, you come back to a guy and you guys aren't even close to the same level.
Yeah.
And he's thinking like, oh, it's because he had that trainer. It's like, yeah, he did. But it's the work. He iterated, you know, like we were talking about. He kept getting better all the time.
Sure.
Versus the other guys who are afraid to evolve will just keep playing to their strengths.
Yeah.
Keep doing the same workouts.
Yeah.
And keep putting themselves in environments where they succeed and they don't get exposed.
Absolutely.
Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think that those legendary work ethics that you and I grew up emulating and admiring is a thing of the past. I don't know if there's too many of those types of leaders to follow. Like I said previously, LeBron is definitely, I love him so much for the fact that he's been public about how hard he trains and how hard he recovers. But it's hard to have a conversation with a 17-year-old kid who is making more money than you. You know, how open-minded is that individual going to be? So like you said, it caps their roof really low because they can't grow because they think they've already arrived. And there's just only so much highlight reel type basketball that you can play and succeed and get to the next level. Like that highlight reel basketball stuff is dope and it looks cool, but it's not going to get you to the NBA or sustain a career in the NBA. You know what I mean? There's a very small percentage of like ISO ball, ISO one-on-one, I'm gonna cook you type dudes, and then there's a whole bunch of role players.
Yeah.
Everyone can't be an ISO dude.
And people don't realize you can be a role player and make 20 million a year.
Do really well.
And Jeremy likes to say that to like get to the NBA, you just have to be phenomenal, like world class at one thing.
At one thing, yep.
If it's rebounding, boxing out, setting screens, and if you want to be an all-star, you got to be world class in two to three things. Right?
There
so
you go.
That's where you got like a LeBron, guys.
There you go. Well said. I like that.
Things. Just to take this, you know, to round this podcast out to a more personal level of.
Sure.
You know, you're half Korean, half Mexican. You know, you've talked in previous podcasts about the eye test and how you overcame things, that you were blessed with a coaching voice. Can you share maybe more to the mental health aspect, but also what were self-limiting beliefs that you had for yourself, like early on in your career, and then maybe how did you overcome those limiting beliefs?
Sure. Being Asian is hard. Period. I think it's a little easier. You know what? I take that back. I don't even know if this is true or not. I was gonna say maybe a little easier now because times have changed. You know, the America has kind of opened up a little bit more, but I don't know because I'm not a kid in America right now. So that's a false statement. That's an ignorant statement to say. But when you and I grew up, obviously, depending on where we grew up, being Asian is difficult. What are the stereotypes? You know what I mean? You're smart.
Can't say it on.
You're supposed to be good at math and science. Blah blah blah. Right? But I wasn't. So that was a struggle. Secondly, I am half Mexican and half Korean, but I do not look half Mexican. So
you get the full Asian treatment.
You know what I mean? Which experiencing racism was a common day-to-day thing. And because my father was Mexican and I grew up in a single parent home, my mom wasn't around, I didn't understand my Asian culture, nor did I ever want to understand it because it was the reason why I was getting made fun of every day, right? So like I was pissed off that I was Asian. And my dad, he's a 20-year Army vet. He's like, you better figure that shit out. Like,
we don't care.
You'll be all right. Like, you know, it's gonna make you tougher, which it did. But early, I didn't know how to cope. And I was a sensitive ass kid, so like I would cry. Like I didn't know, like, and then being my father's son, crying is a sign of weakness. So now I'm just like, I'm Asian and I'm weak and I can't, live up to my father's standards. So like it was a difficult thing for me, but I think what allowed me to rise out of the ashes was my dad being the hard disciplinary that he was. Like he always encouraged me to rise above. Words can't hurt you, and if somebody physically tries to impose their will, you better defend. I expect you to defend yourself. And those messages continuously over and over harped to me and recited to me, developed this bravado, this ego, this chip on my shoulder mentality and attitude. And then the football thing just came up. I don't know why I grew an affinity to football. I have no idea. My dad is a big football fan, so maybe that was it. But the physicality of football was something that I really, really embraced. I loved the physical collision nature of maybe letting out all my frustration and anger because of all this built up, emotion that I could finally like unleash on someone and not get in trouble for it.
Yeah. And it's a very American sport. Too.
Very American sport. So it felt good to hit people. And I was a little athletic. I was quick. I knew how to make people miss, and it just played well into my skill set. So I think that the personal battles that I underwent had everything to do with my mental health being the way it was basically forged under the pretense of this is who you are, this is what you are, you can't do nothing about it, but what can you do about it? And that's all due to my dad's, very, very structured and disciplined household. Like, we're not bees around here.
Yeah.
You better stand up and walk tall. Don't be disrespectful, but don't let anyone disrespect you.
Right.
And the physical nature of football allowed me to express myself in ways that I never knew I could. I was pretty good at it, and that allowed me to kind of excel. And then, like you said before, I'm 5'8", I'm 165 pounds, and I'm not a 4.3 speed. So how did I figure that problem out? Train, lift weights, buy the jump soles. I think we all did Slam magazine, right?
We got the 5K9.
Yep. I did all that, and that's what created the work ethic. Like I don't want to be put in this category. A, it's already hard being Asian as is. Yeah. B, who plays football that's Asian? C, you're not fast. So how did I differentiate myself between that box that I was put in always and all the time? And it was a good challenge for me though. Like I loved it, and I always did well when I was counted out. It became a game to me.
The underdog.
Man, the underdog role was like, all right, I'm gonna show you.
Let's go.
And it felt so good to take people's jobs.
Yeah.
It felt so good to take people's jobs. And then finally, I experienced some success my senior in high school, played at a junior college, got a scholarship to Division II, and I was the leading receiver for 2 years straight at my Division II school. So great career.
I told you so.
Right? Definitely looking back on it, like looking at all the people that counted me out and what they did.
Yeah.
And then finally being the coach that I am, right? Because when you are 5'8" Asian dude in front of a New Orleans Pelicans basketball team, you have to have an ego. You have to feel a certain type of way about yourself, a certain confidence. Otherwise, no one's going to believe you. And my early upbringing of being Asian in America and experiencing everything I did prepared me for that, because I fear nothing. Like, I'm not afraid of anything because of that. You know what I mean? So, and again, I'm not arrogant or hold my head up high or, nose up in the air type thing. But I'm just saying, like, that experience forged me. I took it for what it is and I used it as a tool. And here we are today.
Yeah. And if you hadn't been like that, you would have sank.
For sure.
And that's something I really struggled with is, I walk into a gym with Jeremy, to any NBA facility, and I meet any skill development coach, strength coach. Hey, this is my trainer Josh. They take one look at me and they're like, oh, is he your brother? Is he?
Immediately.
Is he
I can only imagine
is
that.
he your cousin? Like,
right.
Cool. They immediately think like,
oh, yeah. he got put on.
Yeah, I got put on.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time in the NBA. Like, you know, this guy's like friend from college or whatever. Pretty
much.
And so that was hard because I would put that on me before I walked in. Like I'd already wear that knowing in. So to me, what I had to do is I'd almost had to like, okay, what is the worst thing they could be saying about you? You're not qualified. You don't know anything. You're just as like homie or whatever.
Yep.
What are the things that I can prove that I'm not those things? And that's the only thing in my control. Okay, how can I posture? How can I talk in a way where I'm communicating? I know. Do I have facts to back it up? Okay, hey, this is the tape. These are the statistics. These are the reports that we've gotten from other facilities that you guys respect. Like, immediately build credibility in those situations. But
absolutely. It
was hard because I would always impose that self-limiting belief on myself. And so people who are watching this, like, you know, you got two guys who've worked with players in the NBA who are Asian, like you can make it, right?
Absolutely.
And you can do it. It's just, you got to stop playing that card too. Like, oh, I'm Asian. It's because I'm Asian that these guys, oh, it's going to be hard to get Asian. That's something, you know, to this day I still struggle with. I just struggle with it less. And as I grow, I'm hoping to kind of just chip away at it over and over again. So,
and you will.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to say to you is that, you know, being in this field, it's very toxic. In the whether it's on online world or in the strength and conditioning, it's just very toxic. People adhere to their own philosophies and principles, and everyone else is trash. And it goes with trainers too. Everyone is just like, that guy's stuff is garbage. And so I think it is a breath of fresh air that you have adopted a philosophy of truly wanting to help the next generation. And I think that's what it's about, because our time will pass. That doesn't mean we can't be strength coaches like when we're 60, but our time of experimenting on our body and being able to grind this way, especially, you know, you're newly married, but once we both have more kids and want other things, it's not going to be the same. And I think it's so important to take what we've learned and, you know, codify it and like help the next generation. And
so important.
So I appreciate that you take that approach, trying to be professional online and also being just willing to help anybody who's hungry. Obviously, like, time is the most valuable asset, so you can't help everyone, and that's an important distinction. And, you know, that brings us to your app, which is, you know, you've described it as your lifetime work, which is coming out February.
All-Star Weekend. Check it out.
So Mike's got his own app where he's got different programs, whether it's recovery, knee injuries, performance, vertical jump, those types of things. I don't know if I'm describing it right, but
you are.
You know, all filmed from him, all his own videos put together to help you. So guys who want to train with MikeG and be exposed to GBG training, download the app. Yes,
absolutely. And I just want to say to everybody out there that it is about reaching back and pulling forward. 1,000%. There's no reason to break down someone else's building to build yours up. We all can eat, we all can be fruitful, and it matters to be happy. So if you're busy worrying about how to hurt someone else or downplay someone else or discount someone else, you're really exposing to the world how you feel inside. So just know that, and we recognize that, and we don't all need to be like that. We all could be happy, we all can love each other and help each other and support each other, and like, let's just remove the ego from the field and focus on our people, which is our peers and our athletes. So that's very important for me.
Don't learn the hard way. So appreciate Mike coming on.
My man.